Welcome to Share, a podcast production of Amatus Recovery Centers. I am your host, Kabir Singh. We'd like to start each program by reminding you that addiction is treatable and recovery is possible. If you or a loved one needs help, call 1-800-81-SOBER or visit amatusrecoverycenters.com today. Today, I'm especially excited to talk to my good friend, Matt Paris. He's the Regional Community Outreach Specialist for Amatus Recovery Centers and is currently working on building out our National Family and Alumni Services program. Matt is in recovery and has an amazing story to share. We'll hear a little bit about that and then find out what exactly the alumni program is and why it's so important for new people in recovery to have this form of support. Matt, welcome. So thanks for joining us today. And you know that we've been launching these podcasts and inviting in folks to a variety of topics and subjects. And today's a little bit more informal. We're gonna be talking about what brought you into recovery, and I'm really gonna start with that. Is, you know, I know the whole story, and there's a lot of details in there that you may or may not share here, but you know, it encapsulate it for us. What brought you into recovery?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Kabir. Very excited to be here. So my story, for me, begins well before I ever picked up a drink or a drug. Right. I do believe this is a disease, and I was born an addict, right? But it wasn't until, craving acceptance at a young age and not liking who I was led me to finding drugs and alcohol. It was a sports injury, which in my sophomore year of high school, I broke my wrist playing football and got prescribed pain medication. And at this point, I had already started smoking and drinking a little bit and experimenting with other drugs with friends. But it was opiates through that injury that led to my disease really progressing at that point. And it took off rapidly from there. So from that sports injury to an oral surgery, getting several teeth removed, I just found different ways to get these pills into my life. And it just kind of rapidly went downhill from there, and eventually it was a car accident. We flipped our car 3 times on 270, and I walked away without a scratch. And everybody was coming up to me, Matt, you should be thanking God you're alive right now. You should be so grateful that you're alive. And my disease just couldn't let me see that. You know, I'd been in many car accidents before. The chaos was normal to me, and eventually, after going back to seeing that car and seeing what was left of it and realizing I shouldn't have walked away from that car that day, that I realized that I need some help.
Wow. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad that wasn't the end of the show for you. Mm-hmm. You mentioned a sports injury, and then you also mentioned marijuana and alcohol. You know, at that particular time on that sports team, the football team, were there your peers were drinking and smoking, and was that common?
It was definitely common. The high school I went to, our sports team was all about being 11, right? On a scale from 1 to 10, being 11, be the best you can be, and that meant no drinking, no partying, have one focus and achieve that goal. But I was the type of person who went to school just to party and play ball, and I wanted to fit in with everybody, and the majority of everybody was partying.
Yeah. So you perhaps after that sports injury found yourself in a unique, perhaps even a lone space where maybe you didn't match up with the peers that you had. Yeah, maybe some of them were drinking and smoking. Maybe some of them were not. They were sticking into that 11 that you described. So how did you find yourself? You mentioned being introduced to opiates. I understand that that's a common way. That forget about just youth in general, although that is in part and parcel a way youth are introduced to opiates through injuries in sports. But a lot of folks are introduced to opiates through injuries, whether it be car accidents, just getting older, like I am, and you know, a variety of different things like that. Tell me a little bit more about where you found yourself. What maybe when the sports were no longer important or.
So there is definitely common, right? At the time, I was coming across more and more athletes who were also using the same medications, right? And for them, they were using them as prescribed. For me, it was abusing them. I found it necessary to crush it up and put it up my nose as opposed to taking it as prescribed. But through that process, I definitely found myself to be more alone than ever, and what once started out as wanting acceptance and being accepted by my peers and fitting in just led me down a dark path of loneliness. Most definitely.
Yeah, you talk about being alone. I know that is one of the hallmark feelings of those that are certainly in recovery. You and I are consider ourselves to be people in recovery. I think we identify as such, and I know you and I have talked on various levels personally over the years, and we talked to a variety of other people. Being alone, feeling different, things of that nature are again often telltale signs of people who may choose to turn to substances, abuse of alcohol, prescription medications and the like. So, I applaud you and commend you for sharing that and getting vulnerable here with the group, and for those of you out there that have a similar feeling, know that there is help out there, and there are ways to treat the way you feel and maybe the underlying conditions there. And so, Matt, you've been to treatment yourself. For those who are thinking about treatment, but might be afraid to take that step, whatever it looks like, call a guy like you. Mm-hmm. Or call a crisis line, suicide prevention line, whatever the case is. What can you tell them about our process? I guess you're most intimately involved in our process here, so
sure.
We'll just go ahead and use that as an example.
Absolutely. So, first, my personal experience was having no idea where to begin. Right, I went to my mother and asked for help, and she was just as stunned to this whole process. So she was able to, we were fortunate enough to have insurance, and she called the back of the card and got me into a treatment provider. Right, and for us, this was 8-9 years ago. For us now, this process has become so much easier because people like myself and others in this field are going out and providing this outreach service, right? We're letting people know, at the hospitals, at the health departments, in schools, we're everywhere, letting people know that these resources are readily available. And we make the process as simple as possible, right? As long as you are ready and willing to get treatment, we are going to plug you into the right places to make sure you're getting the best treatment possible.
Right. And is it safe to say that someone calling in, again, we'll use our 800 number as an example here, a sample set, we'll be able to speak to an individual that would be able to either assess them and figure out a particular level of care they may need. Let's just say that you and I know that there's very few people that have just one, and by one I mean either mental health disorder or substance abuse disorder. They generally go in tandem.
Right.
But if somebody wants to go to an outpatient level, or if they need detox, they'll be able to sort of flesh that out.
Most certainly. So I think it's also very important that this is a personable process, right? So, for instance, if you do call our 1-800 number, you're going to talk to more than likely another addict in recovery who's been through this process themselves, who can sit there and relate to them, and then also go through this clinical pre-screen process, right? Where they can dictate, this is the most appropriate level of care. This is, where you're going to get the best services, whether, you require a medical detox, or maybe you're, a first-time user of marijuana and you would be best fit in an IOP program. And they're able to work together and find out the best solution for you.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm not intimately involved in the process. I do understand, certain aspects of what we do at Amatus Recovery Centers, and I currently, as it stands, I don't think we have anything in particular like that addresses eating disorders. So my understanding, and maybe you'd be able to speak to a little bit more to this, if somebody calls in and perhaps there is something involved with eating disorders and there is no substance abuse there, are we able to help navigate those people to programs that outside of our?
Most definitely. And that's, I think, what makes us so special is that anyone we come into contact with, we're helping place in treatment, whether it's one of our 14 facilities or anywhere across the country. We have a very large outreach team with, connections all over to make sure that when we come into contact with someone, they're getting the best services possible, and it doesn't have to be with us. We're not a cookie cutter program, right? We need to be able to treat people where they're at, and if we don't have the means to do so, we're going to make sure we find a facility that does.
That's great. I'm definitely happy to hear that. So, alumni. When I hear that word, being a graduate of College Park and in Terrapin, I'm an alumni of there. They send me something in the mail once a year, and they ask me for money.
Yep.
When I hear the word alumni, what's our alumni program? What does that mean?
It means we're not going to ask you for money. Yeah, our alumni program is very special. I thoroughly enjoy it because it's keeping in contact with clients, right? I run a group at all of our Maryland facilities each week and do the same spiel for the most part, letting them know what the purpose of our alumni program is. And I let them know that, there's many paths to recovery, and one of the most important pieces of that is building a network, right? When you go to a 12-step program or whatever that looks like, you need people to support you. This is a we thing, right? Recovery is about togetherness, and we want to be that for them when they leave treatment, right? You leave, you get connected with us through Facebook, through different events. We're putting on an Maryland Amatus Alumni Speaker Jam this weekend, and just keeping people connected, because it gets hard out there. For new people in recovery, it can be very triggering to go back to life on life's terms, and we need that support. So we're creating a community within our community for those clients when they leave us.
So I'm a client, a former client, if you will, in one of your alumni groups or programs, and one of the things I hear a lot about, and has been a part of my own process, is 12-step recovery. Hey Matt, love your alumni groups, man. I'm not going to 12-step recovery. I don't. What do you got for me? What would you tell me?
So all I can share is my personal experience, right? And being a member of a 12-step fellowship myself is that I know it works, right? And I encourage them to, express to me what they may have not gotten out of it or what may have deterred them from it, and trying something new, right? One of the biggest parts about recovery is getting uncomfortable, and I always suggest that if you don't like something, try something new, so that would be my biggest words of encouragement, is just keep giving it a shot.
My understanding is that you have supported clients in attending Celebrate Recovery, which I understand is a faith-based.
Absolutely.
So sort of, can you talk a little bit more about?
Most certainly. So there are many paths to recovery, right? And the biggest would be AA and NA, but there's Smart Recovery, Celebrate Recovery. My church personally has their own version of Celebrate Recovery, where they're able to bring anyone for recovery, whether it's recovery from relationships, abuse, eating, anything, overeating. No matter what it is, we come together and work on this together, right? And in any of these programs, you'll always hear that togetherness, that we part of the fellowship.
Yeah, it sounds like at the end of the day, most of these core issues are rooted in either addictive behaviors or manifested in the ways that we think, our mental health and the like. So wherever it is that we find our anchoring into, sounds like it's the best option. But if I'm taking away anything from what you're saying, it sounds like that we basically we keep trying. Yep. We keep trying until we find the shoe that fits. Exactly. And sometimes it might be multiple pairs of shoes. And, for me, I know I also identify with 12-step recovery, and I also identify with multiple pathways to recovery, because a lot of times, and maybe you could speak a little bit more to this, the 12-step fellowships or traditionally are not great fans of medication-assisted treatment and the like, and members who are on such treatments, don't always feel at home, and so there are other ways to have natural supports in the community and formulate your sort of own groups and work in those different areas.
Sure. It's definitely important, and not everyone's perfect, right? And you're going to have certain members of certain fellowships who aren't going to agree with everything, right? Everybody's entitled to their opinion. So I think it's important that no matter what background you come from, what path of recovery you choose, that you just find what home works for you, and whatever that looks like. because as I always say, the longer we stay in treatment, the better chance we have at achieving long-term sobriety. And then through that process, finding your own path to what, treatment and recovery are not the same, right?
Yeah.
But that transition is what the alumni program is made to be so important to help guide them in that process.
At what point in your recovery, what'd you say you have now? How long you have?
About 8.5 years.
8.5 years. Was there a particular point where you started to see a more profound change than the other? Was it?
I kind of take it from you, Kabir. Is I agree that 5-year mark is where you really see life come back. You're hopefully very grounded in that recovery program that you choose, and you just see life unfolding before your eyes and really growing to something beautiful.
Yeah. It is, and I definitely agree that. I don't want to scare listeners away from any of this, and say that it doesn't get better until 5 years. It certainly gets different.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of my particular intellectual capacities and the like, really came back full flourishing, I guess, if you will, kind of that 3 to 5 year mark. But the exuberance that was brought about in early recovery, that it's often referred to in our fellowships as a pink cloud,
right.
Was there nearly immediately. I mean, I would say even in my episode of treatment in 2009, I had some laughter that really came from the belly for the first time, and it caught me off guard. I was like, was that me? And yeah, that's beautiful. Give us a bit of an overview of the Amatus family and the alumni programs that we offer.
So we are very very excited to be trying to roll this out nationally, and working with Mark, who has done a phenomenal job bringing the family program here in Maryland. We're trying to capture not only the alumni community within the 3 Maryland centers here, but then coupling that with the family program, right? So we're doing different events and trying to keep people engaged once they leave treatment, and guide them through this process of recovery. But as they are starting their recovery journeys, it is so important that the families are starting their recovery process as well. We call this a family disease because we hurt the people closest to us, right? And we don't necessarily always recognize the damage that we're causing. I know for me personally, I wasn't the type that stole from my mother or did anything to harm her, right, maliciously, but the sleepless nights, right, the lack of peace that she had because she was constantly worried about where her son was and is he okay. So we're able to give that back to the families by creating this family support group.
Matt, thanks for being here. Well, folks, hopefully Matt shed a little bit of light on how positive life in recovery can look. Although the thought of attending treatment might seem daunting, it'll be a life-changing experience that I hope can open up your whole world to new possibilities. If you or someone you love needs help, please call 1-800-81-SOBER or visit AmatusRecoveryCenters.com today. Thanks for listening to Share, and we'll see you next time.